We have the pleasure of having Mr. Joe Fallik here with us to share his story.
Well, this is basically my autobiography. I'm going to start by talking about my parents, because without my parents I wouldn't be here. And my father came from a little town in Poland, Orthodox Jewish family. When he was 14 years old, that would be in 1907, he decided he wanted to come to the land of opportunity. And so he left his family, 14 years old, from Poland. He went to Hamburg, Germany, and there he worked on the docks. He worked, I don't know what else he did, and he accumulated enough money so he could book passage to the United States. And when he came to the United States, he went to Ellis Island, as did thousands or millions of immigrants. And his name is inscribed on a immigrant wall on Ellis Island. I've seen it. One of my brothers had that done. And when he got into the States, he had two uncles who had come here before he did. And so one of them was a waiter. The other one had a retail store selling children's wear. So my father lived with a waiter, and so my father became a waiter. And that's what he did for the rest of his career life, the waiting. My mother came from Poland also. And while her mother was carrying her, when she was still a fetus, her father passed away, so she never knew her father. She was born in 1900. My father was born in 1893. She was born in 1900, and when she was an infant, her mother and two of her siblings came to the United States. So her grandparents raised her. And she was the fifth of five siblings. There were four boys before her. She was the youngest. So she came to the States in 1908, and she didn't know her mother. Her mother was here before, and they met on the dock. She came with the last two other brothers. And it was the first time she saw her mother, 8 years after she was born. And they lived on the Lower East Side. I don't know if you've seen Godfather 1, Robert De Niro on the East Side, push carts. That's where they lived, in that section of Manhattan, Lower East Side of Manhattan. I remember them because I'm that old. And they lived in a one-bedroom apartment on a street called Suffolk Street, and one-bedroom apartments with no central heat, no hot water. The bathroom was in a hall. It was a commode. They had no shower, no bathtub, and so the five of them lived there. They had a potbelly stove in the kitchen, which they fed coal and wood to get heat and to cook on, and to get hot water to take a bath in a laundry tub. When somebody had to take a bath, they had to heat the hot water up, put it into the tub, and get in. My mother was going to take a bath. Everybody had to leave. So not only did five siblings and my grandmother live there, but they rented space out to other immigrants for perhaps 50 cents a night. Now, here they are, four boys and my mother. And believe it or not, three of the men became professionals. One became a dentist, two of them became pharmacists, and the fourth one, the youngest one, just above my mother, was a taxi cab driver. And my mother and father met at some function. My father fell in love with my mother immediately. She was a very pretty woman. They got married in 1918 and 1919, and I arrived in 1920. I was the first of the new generation. The other four brothers had not been was not married yet and didn't have any children, and so they used to remark that they were practicing on me. They hadn't had children before and so forth. And we moved to, after they got married, of course, my mother and father had to have their own apartments. They couldn't live in the east side with the other siblings, so they moved to a section of Brooklyn called Williamsburg. And we had the second floor of a brownstone house. And 2 years later, almost to the day, another brother came along, Seymour. I was born October the 7th, he was born October the 8th, 2 years later. 2 years after that, we had another brother named Irvin, who suffered a tragic death. You know, in those days, they had no refrigerator. There were no appliances, dishwashers, laundry machines. My mother had to scrub floors. She had to scrub the clothes, clean the clothes, even the diapers. They didn't throw the diapers away, get reused for them. They'd do the diapers, then she would hang them on the line to use them again. And so she was cooking on the stove. She had a big pot of chicken soup with chicken, and my brother Irvin, the youngest one at that time, that was in a high chair near it, and he pulled a pot of soup over him. I don't know how they got a doctor, because we didn't have a telephone and no ambulance. They finally got the doctor. The doctors in those days used to visit the houses. And they had a full-time nurse, and he lasted about 4 or 5 days, and he passed away. So my mother couldn't stand living in that apartment anymore, so we moved to another section of Brooklyn called Coney Island. Ever heard of it? It's on the ocean, Atlantic Ocean. It's a resort area, and we moved into. My mother had an aunt that had an apartment there. This aunt had 5 children and her husband, and we had at the time the 4 of us. We had one bedroom, and my mother became pregnant, and in 1927 she delivered George. So it was myself, Seymour, and George. My mother and father living in one room in that apartment, one bathroom, one icebox. We used to get ice delivered every day. You had no refrigerator. You'd buy a 15-cent piece of ice or 10%, and the ice would melt, and underneath there was a pan to collect the melted water. The next morning the ice man would come around, and my mother would say 15 cents or 20 cents, and he would carry the ice upstairs. And we grew up in Coney Island, and in summertime we were on the beach all the time. It was a big beach and a big boardwalk, roller coasters, and all kinds of rides for kids, and it was a great place. So we were outside most of the time, not like the children of today. We played outside, we played on the streets. And we grew up in Coney Island. We moved from time to time from apartment to apartment. And we always had a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. And one of the reasons why they moved all the time, because landlords offered what was called 1 month's concession. They would give free rent for 1 month. So the parents, their parents could move. In 1929, we had the Depression, the crash, Wall Street crash, where men were jumped out of windows to their death. My father was still working as a waiter, and he worked nights, and I can recall he coming home 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and leave some money on the icebox, and we eventually got a refrigerator. He'd leave 80 cents or $1 during the week, and we had 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and 1 bedroom was always rented out to somebody that paid about $18 a month, and our rent was about $40, so my parents had to come up with $22 a month for rent. On a Sunday morning or a Monday morning, my father would leave $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, because that's when the restaurant was had more business. But then things got active in Europe with Hitler, and France, Germany, Russia, the United States all had an inkling that we would be going to war. So we were shipping military equipment to France, England, and Russia, and the economy in this country got much better. And my father was able to make a better living then. Okay, now let's talk about me a little bit. I went to public school in Coney Island. They had no middle school or junior high then. You spent 8 years in elementary school and went right into high school. And I was brilliant, so I advanced twice, and I graduated a year earlier than I should. I went into high school in 1933. I had to walk about 1.5 miles each way from where we lived to go to high school to save a nickel or a dime. But you know, we didn't think much of it. We didn't know we were in depression even during the bad days, because we lived outside. And my parents were able to provide wonderful food for us. Somehow they did it. And elementary school and high school came easy to me. In those days, teachers were respected immensely. You could hear a pin drop in the classroom. And but so I focused, I paid attention, I was curious. In high school, I also did very well. And they had the colleges in New York, Brooklyn College and City College, that offered free tuition if you had an average of 85 or higher, which was no problem for me, so I went to Brooklyn College. I started in 1937. The only cost was buying textbooks, and we bought used textbooks, because when somebody finished the course, they didn't need the textbook anymore, so we used to buy them. And of course I had to use a train to get back and forth to college. In those days I was a teenager, you know. I hung around with a bunch of guys, and we rented a cellar which had a commode and whatnot in it, and we fixed it up and bought some used furniture. We used to play cards there, have dances with girls and whatnot. And so when I went to college, I could not focus. I had everybody thought I was going to become a dentist like my uncle, one of my mother's siblings. I had no feeling for it. My friends, most of them worked in the garment center in New York, which was big at the time, and they made $12 a week, stuff like that. And I went to college. Just 2 other of my friends went to college. Everybody else went to work. But I graduated college, and I didn't get very good grades, but I never flunked. When I graduated college, I took the test to be admitted to dental school, and I was rejected. It really didn't bother me, because I really had no feeling for it. But so as a college graduate, I went to work at the garment center also, making about $12 or $15 a week. 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, right? And then we had conscription. All the men, we were considered 1A, which is draftable, and then there were other categories, which if you had a family, if you were physically impaired, you had 4F. And at the same time, the government was looking for people to work in various areas, research and development, electronics, chemistry. So I applied for 3 positions. They badly needed people, and I was accepted at all 3. One was the Navy, one was the Army, and the other 2 were in the Army. And I took the job. It was out in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, which to me is about a 2-hour ride out of New York City, but it was like a foreign country to me. We didn't move much out of Coney Island, and I went to work for the government there, working with a group of men doing research and development on radio direction finding. If the enemy was communicating, you wanted to see if you could locate that position and destroy it somehow. Radio direction finding. But I met my wife, who came from that area. She was a young girl, about 16, and I fell in love with her. I fell in love with her madly, and I could not focus on my job. So I had a deferred status going into the Army, because they considered that my working for the government doing research and development was more important than being a soldier in the Army. So I was not drafted. I had a different, I think it was 3A, but I wasn't producing. So my supervisors said they didn't need me anymore. So I was immediately drafted. I went into the Army, 1943, February 43. Became a soldier. I walked into a big Quonset hut wearing civilian clothes, came out wearing a uniform. And it turned out that because I had a college degree and I worked for the government, some aspect of radio direction finding, the Army thought it was wise for me to go to various schools, electronic schools, radio, and then I ultimately went to a radar school in Stewart, Florida, Camp Murphy, not far from West Palm Beach, about 50 miles from here. And I went to radar school and studied a radar that had been developed by the British. The British had several radars along the east coast and the southern coast of England to alert the military and the public that Germans would send bombers over so they can go to safe areas as best they could. I'm not sure you know exactly how a radar works, but a radar transmits a signal from a large antenna. You need a large antenna because you get better performance. The more power that you transmit, the bigger the antenna, the capture area, and the signal hits a reflecting object like an airplane. It comes back again. It travels at the speed of light, 186,000 miles a second. And then the signal is processed and is put on a monitor. So operators there, they could see it. And then the signal was made to alert the public and the military to go to their safe havens and to try to send airplane, well, some of our fighter airplanes up to shoot down the Germans. So that was the British system, but we had the same radar, and then we developed other radars. I trained on and of course, for a year I had dated my wife, my girlfriend, before I went into the Army. Her fault, because I couldn't focus on my work. Anyhow, I trained on a mobile version of the radar.
Winter Palace Girls. Thank you. Thank you. You too, Joe.
Thank you. I trained on a mobile version of the British radar. British radar was sunk in concrete. It was a fixed station. And I trained on a mobile version, which was expected to go into invasions. And it was called the ground-controlled intercept radar, to detect the enemy aircraft, get its location as best as we could, and a controller would communicate air-to-ground and ground-to-air communications to send fighters to shoot down the planes. And this mobile version